back. Thank you for staying with us right here on the Daily Report. It is time now for that important conversation. I'm George Maringa. On Zen Language this time is Catherine Simaloy. My guests on the State of the Nation are none other than two gentlemen, Professor Peter Kagwanja, a policy advisor and strategist. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us. And joining us virtually will be Amashere Munene, Professor, a political historian. He'll be joining us virtually on this conversation. Professor, good evening. Thank you for joining us on the program tonight.
Thank you.
Brilliant indeed.
My pleasure to be here.
Asante sana. We're with Professor Kagwanja here, and I'd like to begin with him before I come to you. Right there he is. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us. Professor Kagwanja, do we have a deputy president?
What a question to start off with. yeah, we have two.
In the era of impeached incoming.
There is something Catholics call purgatory. Yes. It's a kind of a place where you are not and you are. You are waiting for the final decision. So we have two deputy presidents in purgatory, in legal terms. The first is the one who was impeached by the National Assembly and Senate. And the court has not decided on his fate as yet.
Yes.
And of course, as you know, it is the court that has the final verdict, given our impeachment process. To note that our impeachment process is very different from that of the United States, where in the case of the United States, during an impeachment process, Senate transforms itself into a court of impeachment. And as a court of impeachment, its verdict is final. It also takes its good time and investigates everything in just the way a court of law will do. And therefore, we have had cases lasting for months, others for years, in the place of impeachment. But the Kenyan one is, they say, is inquisitory. It is like a commission of inquiry that verses a verdict, not in the legal terms, but it basically says whether or not the deputy president or any other government official has been impeached. Remember, impeachment is not, a judgment as to whether you are guilty or not guilty. It is a judgment as to whether you can be tried or not. So our impeachment process, without possibly inadvertently, knowingly or unknowingly, ended up surrendering the final power of verdict to our courts, which I think is the way it is because we have a lot of trust in our courts. And therefore, the former deputy president, or rather impeached deputy president, Gachagua, anticipated that the new fight will not be in the court, in the National Assembly or Senate. It will be in the court. I mean, in the courts, and therefore he prepared adequately for the courts, basically reserving the rest for the court of public opinion during the impeachment. And you saw how dramatically he moved towards that final end. On this other hand, I think the government strategy was to have a surgical response to Senate, which would, in the wee hours of the morning, you basically nominate and submit to Parliament, and Parliament very quickly and surgically does Professor Abraham Kithure Kindiki as the incoming president, deputy president, and finally, then swear him in the earliest time possible. And I think they did that anticipating that the Gachagua team would end up in court. But then the big contention from the day one was that when Gachagua's team was preparing, it was to ensure precisely that Kindiki is not sworn in. And therefore, we are at that level where the swearing in of Kindiki anytime will give us a deputy president. His failure to be sworn in will keep us in this rebel. And if the court says that there is he cannot be sworn in, then somehow you'll have to think of what to do with Gachagua. So that's where. But for me, the lacuna that we have, or in simple language, the gap that we have, is that God forbade, if something happens to us, then we are in very hot soup. Because it would have, if the president, for whatever reason, is not sitting on his seat, for whatever reason, is not on his seat, then we have a vacuum, because none of the two, the elect and the impeached, would fit the bill. Therefore, you'll have to go to Parliament, National Assembly, and get your Wetangula, Moses Wetangula, acting for 90 days. And in the absence of an electoral commission to preside over in those 60 days, what are we talking about? We are talking about maybe the military taking over. Because there is no election, there is no candidate. And so this is where, you should never allow yourself to be in such kind of a risky situation where you are dribbling your ball very close to the touchline.
Very close.
Yeah, it can get out any time. And in this case, if the Kenyan ball got out of the touchline, I don't think it is safe for us. Our constitution did not anticipate that. Okay. But here we are.
Here we are. Professor Macharia, I could see you reacting to whatever Professor Kagwanja was saying here in studio. And looking at, Gachagua's trajectory, when you reflect on it, what do you believe were the key turning points that led him to this position, or, the specific actions that mark this very slippery slope that he has taken?
Well, Gachagua, he had it coming right from the beginning. It was not a surprise, the trajectories. Those who are keen observers noted that he was making mistakes that could have been avoided. And during the impeachment hearings, and even the trial in the Senate, the emphasis was it is a political game, not so much a legal game, but a political game. And since his politics was not very good, and he appears to have ignored advice. So, and his political enemies were many, and they were not hiding. There were many. He kept on saying, we are going to get him. We are going to ensure this or that or that. And he seemed to have provided them with the right ammunition. So by the time he was being impeached, there was nothing surprising about it. And Professor Kagwanja said about the process of impeachment and trial, which were expected, that that's the way they would go. And I think Gachagua had prepared for that eventuality by being ready to go to court very quickly with his team of lawyers to raise fundamental issues of fairness and unfairness, especially in the process was being hurried. When you had the lawyer John Camino asking what is the hurry for, that kind of thing, it hit right in that there was something untoward that was happening. So he was ready for it in that sense. I would add that as long as the court has not pronounced itself one way or the other, Gachagua is still deputy president. Because the provision of the court making the final determination means that the Senate decision is put aside until the final determination of that. So should something unexpected happen to create a vacancy in the presidency, the sitting deputy president, who happens to be Gachagua, would step in. That's my my view about what would happen.
Oh,
But should the court pronounce itself one way or the other, then that will be settled, in a very clear way.
Okay.
Should the court say that the Senate was right in its decision, that will be it. Should they say it was wrong, it was wrong, then that would be would mean that Gachagua will continue to be deputy president.
Okay. Professor, Kagwanja, we are witnessing a very interesting and significant debate on the interpretation of this constitution that we give ourselves as a people in 2010. And each has come with their own interpretations on how they go about it and, creating a healthy discussion or otherwise, if you think so. And do you think this is a robust discussion that should be had, or have inherent flaws led to more confusion? I mean, is it the more we explore this rubber band, the further we confuse ourselves?
Let's start by observing legitimately that, yes, we gave ourselves this constitution. That's one. Two, we knew that we have formed an executive that has what you call the power of a pure presidential system.
Yes.
Meaning it's very strong. So you kind of figured out, if it does not work, or if this presidency does not hold water or augur well for our interest, how do we get it out in the midterm without necessarily getting into an election? That's how the impeachment clause, I think it's 151 or something, was written into the Constitution. And therefore, what Gachagua is going through is normal. It was envisaged, it was anticipated, not for him, but for many. And he might be the first to be impeached, but I can guarantee you he's not the last, because the wheels of our democracy will continue to grind. And we hope that they are going to grind towards more and more democracy, deepening our democratic system. It was also anticipated that impeachment can actually become a political process where the consideration of whether somebody did things right according to the law or according to the whims of the politician might shape the debate. And that's what we have seen now, that there's politics on the one hand and there's law on the other. So the bickering and the debates that you are seeing are legitimate debates as well, because we have now moved from the political process. The National Assembly, I don't think Gachagua ever thought he would get justice in the National Assembly or justice in Senate. If he expected, that would be total naivety. Why? Because the people who went to impeached him when they knew they had the numbers. And he had not himself prepared according to the art of war, Sun Tzu. He did not prepare himself to win without having to shoot an arrow or a bullet. So he was vulnerable. He found himself outgunned, outnumbered, and out there. Therefore, moving out or being impeached was just a matter of time, and it was happened very quickly. This is the fastest curriculum Kenyans have ever witnessed. Yeah. It was done, and people are now talking about Simon Makonde. The whole process was a Simon Makonde process. And Gachagua himself has also been said to be a Simon Makonde. This, of course, is not the shortest reigning leader. 766 days is not the shortest. Mudavadi, Murumbi, and others have their been for Karanja too. Yeah. But the point I'm making is that I don't think we should do this, think of this as the Kenya's Armageddon, at the end of the world, and so on. Impeachment is part and parcel of our laws. We will impeach Gachagua, will impeach others, and others will be impeached. And there will always be, this was political vendetta. Who said it is not? When they took Clinton to, for impeachment in the United States, it was not because they knew they would sustain the impeachment process. They just needed to drag him through the mud and see the reaction of his wife, who it was already evident that would be standing as president, as a successor at some stage to Clinton. Therefore, her moral disposition towards her husband, who is said to have had an affair with Monica Lewinsky, was essentially the game. So that was the game at that time. And you are going to get more of this as we go by.
Okay.
So Gachagua needed to go so that Raila Odinga can come in and come in with his men and women in some instances. But essentially, this was a political game. Now, what Gachagua is trying to do, and I think he's doing it well, is to challenge politics in court. And whether he sustain it is the issue. But I think he is doing very well. My friend, Kagwanja seems to be doing a wonderful, wonderful job in animating this particular debate, that our law is supreme. It is not our politics. Our politics is not supreme. It's our law that is supreme. That's the same point, our senior elder, Mwite, is trying to make. Yeah.
Okay. Macharia, when you look at, the options that, the president later was left with, we saw the jostling of names, and eventually he settled for whoever, the candidate who had topped the list at the time before the 2022 general election. Looking at the bucket of these two, Mount Kenya East and then the larger Mount Kenya region, where does this leave that region that galvanized a huge percentage of the victory? On one hand, the major, rather one side of the mountain has its candidate who is impeached. On the other candidate is impeached, rather is picked to succeed.
Maybe too much is being made out of individuals.
Okay.
Whether it's this individual or that individual who appears to be given an opportunity to sit in a high office, depending on the whims of the president. Because the deputy president is simply nominated, appointed, or selected by the president. And to really do what the president has been very good in dangling the DP carrot to many people. And in the build-up to this, we saw a lot of eager people who thought they might be the one playing ball along the way. Does that affect the region in a big way? The answer is no. I think the mountain region is very unhappy generally because things have not been going well in the country. The country is suffering. And because the country is suffering, people are suffering. And when people are suffering, they move their blame to the main person responsible, the president. I'm trying to dangle and say, have one person from your village having a particular position, therefore support me. It will not work because the issues are bigger than individual persons. This myth of dividing the mountain between east and west, it's not new. It's something that has been there for even the colonial days. In fact, the colonials created that myth, that division, in 1956, when they tried to divide the Mau Mau and said, now there are some good people in the Mau Mau and bad people in the Mau Mau. Many preparing for the election of 1957. They did that, and they rigged Eliud Magu out in the process.
Yeah.
So the main issue here is not who is made number two. And whoever is going to be number two will have to play ball with Ruto, subservient here and there, doesn't matter. The main thing is what the general population in the mountain and in the country feels about the way the country is going. And right now, the feeling is not very positive.
Okay.
So it is not so much whether it's Gachagua or Kindiki or some other person who is made to sit in that high office that will show the public. No. The public is now more fundamental on issues rather than on personalities.
Yeah, and as you respond to Prof, I'll go in that question with the nation seemingly divided and, opinion is variant over Gachagua's impeachment. Is the electorate extremely disillusioned, as the Gen Z would call delulu, or is this an awakening moment or a demand for reform? What do you read from what you're seeing from the electorate?
I think there is an underlying factor here. At one point, I think I made the point that 2027, election is going to be about Ruto versus the economy. I said that at the beginning. To be Ruto versus the economy.
The 2022?
The 2027 August 10 election will be Ruto versus the economy. And therefore the economy doesn't seem to be doing well, and therefore there's a lot of disillusionment across the board. The deals that are going on, whether it's a Adani deal on Ketraco, Adani deals on the airport, other deals and so on, the tendering processes which have been brought to the fore, if you read the papers today, all these things are compounding this general disillusionment. And therefore, I think it is not whether it's Kidiki or it's Gachagua or it's whoever, the environment itself is the one that has produced. Professor Macharia Munene, when he was teaching us in class, would tell us from time to time that there are two approaches to history, that they are makers of history, individuals who make history, but sometimes individuals are produced by circumstances. Hitler did not rise in Germany because he was the best. He rose because of the circumstances the Germans found themselves after the First World War. And in the Kenyan situation, the future of the country will be determined largely by the circumstances we find ourselves in and the deepening disillusionment that we are experiencing. So that's the first point to make.
Okay.
But when you come to the role of individuals, Mount Kenya as a region, and let me say, we normally see Mount Kenya as three parts. There is Mount Kenya East, which is largely other communities other than the Kikuyu, Embu, Bere, Shuka, and Meru. And on this other end is Mount Kenya Central, which is largely the Kikuyus in the so-called the heartland or homeland. We talk about Nyeri, Kirinyaga, Murang'a, and Kiambu. And then we have Mount Kenya West, which is now what you'd call diaspora. We talk about Laikipia, Nyandarua, and Nakuru. And then we can talk about the Raja diaspora, where other Mount Kenya people have settled, whether they are Merus, Embus, Kikuyus, or whoever, they have settled outside their native, their homeland. Now, the real disillusionment is within Mount Kenya Central and part of Mount Kenya West. That's where the real disillusionment is. And when you come to the Mount Kenya East, there is this assumption that, Kidiki is for Mount Kenya East. That is simply an extension, because the Embus, if you look at the way they voted and the way things have gone, the Embus are more or less sympathizing with the Mount Kenya Central. Now, the issue is that Gachagua himself contributed to this, because when he knew that his goose was about to be cooked, he said, I'm going to do the Samsonian strategy. I'm not going down alone. So he radicalized the region, and that also contributed to the anger you saw in the National Assembly, because you cannot radicalize Mount Kenya region without at the same time drawing criticism from the rest of the country. Why? Because Mount Kenya is such a significant figure or feature, or if you wish, a legion in the entire of the Kenyan body politic. So as such, then, he radicalized the region. When he was impeached in Senate, you can tell, instead of people going home to think about what has happened and reflect on it, they poured into all entertainment places and songs we've never heard, which possibly were sung in 1948 to 1952. The very radicalized songs are the ones that, Kamaru was reborn, but not in his romantic music, but the ones of resistance. So that's what you find now. And the rest of Kenya, obviously, are watching the region, which has become radicalized. And some are saying, are we going back to 2007, 2008, where we had 41 against 1. No, no, no. You can only be 41 against 1 if there is a Kikuyu candidate.
Okay.
Now look at the new discovery or the discovery of Uhuru Kenyatta. His birthday was like the usual birthday of Queen Elizabeth or other British monarch. That's how it was in Mount Kenya region. I guess it's a way of assuaging their guilt because they voted against Uhuru en masse. And now they find themselves where they are, and he had told them that this is likely to happen. So what is the point one is making? That when all this is said and done, the main elephant in the room is the economy. Because the economy is not doing well, people are not doing well, and therefore there is agitation. Whether Gachagua is there or is gone, whether Kindiki is there or is gone, that's immaterial. What is material is that the country is not doing well, and we are not getting towards a direction where we can say we have hope. So I think the onus is now on the president, after this dust settles, to begin moving the country towards a direction where there can be hope. He still has time.
Okay.
So he can turn the country around. Kibaki did that in 2 years, from 2008 moving on.
Okay.
He did turn the economy in a way that he's now going to record as the best. Can Ruto do what Kibaki did? And if he does, and Mount Kenyans begin to feel the warmth of pockets with resources, all these other disillusionment will evaporate like the morning dew.
Professor Macharia, when you look at these, options that the president has, the economy that he's talking about, at the same time, did the ball game for the 2027 election open too soon?
There is no time which is too soon for politicians to behave or misbehave.
Okay.
They are always doing it. And so the question of the president's options will depend on his aptitude and what he thinks and the people he surrounds himself with, and whether or not he listens to advice. There is a belief that he does not believe in believing advice. So he knows things. Therefore, he cannot be told. And that kind of attitude has a tendency of putting somebody into a lot of fix. So then he doesn't see problems coming. And when he doesn't see problems coming, he's caught almost flat-footed. So the president does need to have a meeting with himself about the country and asking himself, why is the country turning against him? If he can ask himself that, and if he's serious about the welfare of the country, he might start finding answers. He might need new advisors from the ones who have, assuming they are advising or not advising. He needs new policy makers. The impression created in the country is that he's got policy makers who are terrible. They don't know what they are doing. Yet they are the ones making decisions. Like the ones surrendering national institutions to foreign organs. It's very clear. And the people are wondering, how can you do that? Whatever excuses he comes up with, they are not washing. So he needs to find out why are people unhappy. And if he can correct that, then yes, there may be some leeway. Yes, he has about 3 years before the next election. And yes, there is a possibility that he might rectify. But the way he's going right now, it will be difficult to rectify. But it is possible to change
Okay.
along the way, and then maybe be seen to do a kibaki, which requires being more self-reliant in production for the country, internal production, as opposed to importing a lot of things.
Okay.
Creating jobs within, as opposed to exporting outside. And I dare say a little emphasis on critical thinking, the humanities, where policy decisions are catered for. There is an overemphasis on the wrong direction, particularly in education. We keep on being told things which make no sense.
Yeah.
That the reason people are jobless is because they did not study STEM or TVET, or they studied history and philosophy, which is not true. Because if that were the case, how come we have so many doctors who are jobless? So many engineers, so many products of TVET and STEM. The problem is not the training people got. It's at the policy making level.
Okay.
Where you have the wrong policy makers deciding the direction of the country, and their decisions are wrong. And so the country is in a mess because of wrong policies. The technicians we have, we can always put them there.
Okay.
But there's a problem at the top.
Indeed. Before you go to a break, Professor Kagwanja, and at the center of it all, when you're seeing all this political activity and legal battles, another spanner is thrown into the works in the way of a debate over the extension of presidential, elective term limits from 5 years to 7 years. Is this legitimate? Is this a distraction? What is the real story? What are the pros and cons of considering the criticism over the lifespan of government projects that last only 5 years?
Well, in good English, they call it a jolt from the blues.
Okay.
It is something you never expected, something you've never heard of, something which doesn't make any sense to anyone. If you're a constitutional lawyer or a constitutional historian, then you know this is hogwash, and therefore you don't even need to think about it.
Okay.
But I wouldn't call it throwing spanners into the works. It is part of the larger game, because you want to bring as much controversy in politics so that you kind of belie what is happening in the real economic world. And there is something they call in America wagging the dog. Normally the dog wags its tail to make a message or to convey a message. So naturally, the tail was created to be wagged by the dog. But what happens when the tail begins to wag the dog? It is the one turning the dog. So it's part of the American, lexicon, language in politics, yes, that when leaders find themselves engulfed by domestic issues that they are not able to find immediate solutions to, they look for escapism, basically new avenues of basically diverting public opinion. And one of them is, of course, to wage war against some neighbors. And because wars evoke patriotism or some sense of nationalism, then in that wave of nationalism, they forget the original problems that they had. Now, in the absence of war, then you have to turn politics into war. And you look like there is a war that you're finding. Now, the most people who are dissatisfied with the economic performance of the government are people from Mount Kenya. Reason being, they are the ones who voted for the United Democratic Alliance, which later on turned into Kenya Kwanza. And they voted because they were unhappy with the economy of the period. If you talk about, oh, they have confiscated our containers, or they are now turned our exports or imports into what they are called counterfeits. How can they be counterfeit when we have no industries? Who are we protecting? Oh, there was all that debate. So it was an economy. And that's why when Ruto's campaign was economy stupid, it made sense. Don't tell us about constitutional moments. It is about the economy. So it made sense. So now they're saying it is about the economy, but they want to move it from the economy into impeaching Gachagua, then changing the electoral laws to give William Ruto another 7 years and a parliamentarian 7 years. They know it will not make sense. It has to go through a referendum because you are tinkering with the main issues that cannot be changed without the referendum. The electoral law, the executive, if you're changing it. It's not by surprise or by mistake that Honorable Musalia Mudavadi is not called Prime Minister, when in essence he is, I think, the third Prime Minister in the Republic of Kenya, after Jomo Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. He's now effectively the Prime Minister of the land. But why are we not calling him Prime Minister? Because the Constitution does not have that. And if you have to call him Prime Minister, then you have to change the Constitution. If you change the Constitution, then you have to seek the mandate of the owner of this land, who is the electorate. And therefore, bringing in these issues of 7 years is part of the continuation of that political masquerading, that political, confusing the situation so that people move from the economy to the politics.
Okay.
Because the economy is not doing well. And I said, the new, what you can call Wataru for William Ruto will be the economy. It is not Kalonzo, it is not Maina Jenga, it is not Uhuru Kenyatta, it's not all these figures who are in the public, it's not Martha Karua, it's not all those. No, Ruto's greatest nemesis is the economy. And with the economy, anybody can rise. Anybody can rise. That's why the Gen Z made such a powerful entry into the Kenyan political space, because there is hunger for new type of leadership, given the economic tribulations that people are facing.
Indeed, a lot we've covered so far, but we still have a lot to cover. We are taking a short break. We are with Professor Peter Kagwanja, policy advisor and strategist, as well as Macharia Munene, a political historian. I'm sure you're having your pen and paper, taking down the lessons, taking down the important nuggets of wisdom that these two gentlemen are talking about. Please feel free to engage us on the socials at TV47 News, at George Maringa _22047 is our SMS number, and our WhatsApp number will be on your screens shortly. Do stay with us. We're back in a short while.